Why are we screwing around with the biomechanics of our body? We think we have to micromanage, all these different things in our body. That's stupid. Like what animal does that in nature? They're all just dropping dead and dying. There's just all these diseases because they just didn't, micromanage their blood markers properly. Those species wouldn't exist. They would go extinct because they suck. Oh my God, your LDL came up. Dude, who cares? Stop eating for 5 days. Your LDL is going to go up. Tell your doctor to fast for 3 days. See what his LDL cholesterol does. Is fasting bad for you now? Is that bad for your heart? Eating Oreo cookies? That's going to lower your LDL? Is that good for your heart? Well, LDL, if it goes up, that's a problem. Bullshit. Scott Weldon, this is from the previous super chat that didn't attach. So thank you again for that, Scott. Dr. Chaffee, my total cholesterol is 458. HDL was 58. Triglycerides were 87, was 12. That's shockingly low. And LDL 400, fasting insulin was 2.5. Would this concern you? First of all, your fasting insulin is excellent. So that's amazing. So these sort of look like American numbers. So I'm going to assume you're in America, and if your insulin is 2.5, that's fantastic. There's Dr. Casey Means, who I had on my podcast. She has the company Levels. They track glucose, have a CGM, constant glucose monitor, to sort of keep track of these sorts of things, see what how to improve your metabolism and your health through glucose and insulin control. And she was saying that sort of the best range they found was between 2 and 6 for your fasting insulin. So that's excellent. And your total cholesterol is 458. That's certainly above the arbitrary boundaries that have been set for cholesterol. But what does that actually mean? Well, in a study with 44,000 people this year, published out of Sweden, they looked for different biomarkers that could best relate to your relate to odds of living over 100. And they found that the two best biomarkers for predicting if you were going to live over 100 was low insulin and high total cholesterol. So you got both. So that's very good. All right. So at least according to that study, you're in a better group for longevity. HDL is 58. So that's fantastic. Above 40 for men and above 50 for women is the target range. And I would actually agree with that target range. Triglycerides 87 from 12. I don't know how they were ever 12, even if after a carnivore diet. I've never seen them that low. And certainly if people are eating carbs and sugar and alcohol and things like that, I don't know. I think that might have been just an error in measurement. But either way, if it's gone from 12 up to 87 or 87 down to 12, either way, you're well below the threshold for any sort of concern for triglycerides. So I wouldn't worry about that. LDL, again, if you just fast, your LDL is going to go up. So eat some cookies, eat some Oreo cookies, and your LDL will come right down if that's what you're worried about. It's not what I'm worried about. And again, it was a surrogate. No, sorry, it was a scapegoat for the sugar companies. They needed something to blame for heart disease, because it was much more likely to be that their product was causing heart disease. They're like, well, we got to shift the blame somewhere else. It's complete bullshit. And so why are we still looking at it? It was a con. It was a con then. It's a con now. So I just don't even look at it. There are no high level studies, none, showing a causative relationship between LDL and atherosclerosis, despite anything that Peter Attia says. There's a recent interview he did with Derek from More Plates, More Dates. And he says, well, everyone knows that this is causative. High LDL causes this. And we know that. Anyone who understands math and statistics knows that. Well, the problem with that is that there are no studies at all that show a causative relationship between LDL cholesterol and atherosclerosis. There's just none. And that's the only thing that you can use to prove causation. In fact, there are randomized controlled trials that can show causation with thousands of people, very high powered, well done and designed studies that actually showed the opposite. They showed a protective relationship, that higher LDL cholesterol actually had lower heart disease and strokes. And that's what the Journal of the American College of Cardiology have said is like there should be no arbitrary upper limit on the amount of saturated fat people eat, because the more saturated fat you eat, the less strokes you get. And there is no relationship between higher saturated fat and higher cardiovascular disease. None. So, I think that, doctors here should relook at that and understand that if you understand statistics and you understand how the nature of these studies, you cannot show causation unless you have from anything but an experimental randomized controlled trial. That's the baseline, and all the ones that have been done have shown the opposite. Okay, so anyone who understands math and science and statistics does understand that, unless they've been completely misled by the propaganda. It's complete crap. It's utter crap. And the only high level studies show the opposite of what their theory shows. And we know that they were lying in the first place. So that fits pretty well, right? We know they're full of shit, and now we have studies proving it. In fact, we had studies then proving it. They just buried them for decades because they didn't want people to know about it. And so, and I wonder why, because they were trying to hide stuff. They were trying to mislead people. And then so they buried that in order to hide it, in order to mislead people. Do not trust these people. Cholesterol was never the problem. Why are we still looking at this? People do ask me about their cholesterol. Well, what about this? And it's generally very similar bloods here. And of course, they're going to be worried about that because we've just been drilled in our ears all the time. I hope to get to a point where no one asks me about their cholesterol, because it was never a problem in the first place. And it's not a problem now. So if I had those numbers, and I probably have something pretty close to those numbers, except my HDL is a bit higher than that, because I've been doing this longer. My insulin's very similar. I wouldn't worry about it. Not because this is a straw man that they make. So, oh well, people say, well, if you're metabolically healthy and your insulin's low, well, then this doesn't cause a problem. That's what Peter Attia said. Oh well, I don't know why they would say that. No. I don't give a shit about your metabolism. I don't give a crap about anything else. LDL is not a goddamn cause of heart disease. Full stop. Okay? Not ever, not in any condition at all. It does not cause heart disease. That was a scapegoat. Something else causes it. Now, does SD-LDL, the small, dense, damaged lipoproteins, do they play a role? Maybe. But they don't cause themselves. Something caused them to exist, and that process is causing these other things, and maybe that plays a role in that. They are not the underlying cause, because something caused them. We make large buoyant LDL molecules. Those do not cause atherosclerosis. You damage those, you disease those. If those were to have a problem, well, something else caused that. So that's not the beginning. That's not the genesis, right? But then again, they're not the driving factor either, because increased SD-LDL only increases your risk factor for heart disease by 70%, 1.7x. Metabolic syndrome increases by 600%, 6x. Type 2 diabetes increases it by 1,000%, 10x, which is up there with smoking, right? So, the one that has the least, relative risk, that's the one, that's the direct cause that causes everything. That's the underlying, bullshit, that little meme, that kid sitting in his car seat going, bullshit. I wish I had that kid. Like, just turn it on every time someone says something asinine like that. Smoking carries something else like 11,500% increased risk of developing lung cancer if you smoke, like per pack year history, right? So it goes up, right? So that's a very, very, very strong link, right? And it goes up, with a dose dependent, criteria, right? And that's not what you see. Even with SD-LDL, you don't see a very strong relationship. It's a very bad marker for that. So why the hell are we looking at it? I do not look at cholesterol as a sign of heart disease risk, because it's not. Because cholesterol never had anything to do with it in the first place, and apparently it's protective. So if anything, you want to look at your cholesterol to see if you're protected. and you have higher LDL, which seems to be protective. You have lower triglycerides, you have higher HDL, you have lower insulin. All of these seem to be protective. So good for you. Well done. Hey everyone, I hope you're enjoying this replay of my YouTube Live. If you'd like to catch a live version and ask your own questions, please go to the next scheduled one, usually every Thursday at 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. All right, see you then, and please enjoy the rest of the Q&A. So Eric C., thank you very much for the super chat. Hi doc, need advice. Triglycerides 132, cholesterol 324, LDL 261, HDL 38, carnivore for 1 month. Doc wants to start statins. 60-year-old male, heart bypass, aortic valve replacement, cancer history. Any advice? Keep doing what you're doing. That is my advice. It's been 1 month. First of all, what were your bloods the month before you started? What were they the day before you started? Right? You need to look at that. You have no idea what the changes were if you don't track the changes. Right? You need before and after. So this is a baseline. Check it again in 3 months, see how it goes. Check it again in 6 months, in a year, see how it goes. You will not develop heart disease and atherosclerosis in a month or 6 months or a year. It takes a lot longer than that. So, whether or not you need statins, you certainly don't need to need them now based on 1 month of just eating differently, regardless of what you're eating. And again, LDL will go up if you just stop eating. So eat Oreo cookies for a week, check your your LDL again. That will be low. Your doctor will be happy, and you can tell him that he's fired because that's idiotic, right? Check your blood sugar again, or check your cholesterol again in a few months after doing a high-fat red meat and water diet. Your HDL will go up. Your triglycerides will keep coming down. Your LDL will do whatever the hell it wants to do, because that's a metabolic issue. If you're eating carbs, LDL will be low. You stop eating carbs, LDL will go up, or you just stop eating totally, it'll go up as well. So that's a metabolic thing. That's not a you're going to die of, dietary cholesterol doesn't really affect our serum cholesterol anyway. We make the majority of cholesterol. It's only when your body is impaired and stopped from making enough cholesterol is when you start absorbing more cholesterol from your diet. And so your body's perfectly regulating this. Like why are we screwing around with the biomechanics of our body? We think we have to micromanage, all these different things in our body. That's stupid. Like what animal does that in nature? They're all just dropping dead and dying. There's just all these diseases because they just didn't, micromanage their blood markers properly. Those species wouldn't exist. They would go extinct because they suck. Our species is not extinct, so we don't suck. And so these things, you don't have to micromanage them. So I would love to get to the day that no one ever asked me about their cholesterol again, but I do understand why they do. Starting something, oh my God, your LDL came on. Dude, who cares? Stop eating for 5 days. Your LDL is going to go up. Tell your doctor to fast for 3 days. See what his LDL cholesterol does. Is fasting bad for you now? Is that bad for your heart? Eating Oreo cookies, that's going to lower your LDL. Is that good for your heart? Well, LDL, if it goes up, that's bullshit. That is not true. There's a direct relationship between high LDL and the development of atherosclerosis. Bullshit. There's zero high-level studies showing that. None. It's correlation only. And there are a lot of correlative studies with hundreds of thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of people showing that higher LDL cholesterol is actually inversely related to heart disease and all-cause mortality. So the higher your cholesterol, the higher your LDL cholesterol, the longer people are living in multi-million person studies, right? The Framingham study itself, which is like probably the only study that your doctor was taught in medical school, certainly the only one I was taught in medical school about cholesterol and heart disease. That was a correlative study. And it said, we were taught that higher cholesterol corresponded with higher rates of heart disease. In fact, it was the opposite. The Framingham study showed the opposite of that, and it was misrepresented by the American Heart Association, which were in the pocket of the sugar companies. This is a fraud. This is a con. I don't pay attention to that. It's not a good marker for heart disease. It was never the cause. LDL is not the cause of heart disease, and so I would just So I don't look at it as that cause. I look at other sorts of things as a marker for that, and that is not it. That is not the one I look at. So I look at fasting insulin. I look at blood sugar control, HbA1c, those sorts of things. Those are much stronger indicators. Much stronger. Smoking, drinking, much stronger indicators.
So, but when you're on a carnivore diet and you're fat adapted, keto adapted, then you will just constantly replenish your glycogen and your ketones from your fat stores. We know this from studies in wolves in 1981. They said